What is up? Welcome. My name is Whitney or Whit, and I'm a GMAT Jerry and Executive Assessment Instructor here at Manhattan Prep. And welcome to this free prep hour. I've got 6 o'clock here on the East Coast, March 23rd, 2025. Crazy to me that we're already at the end of March. But I'm located in Durham, North Carolina. For those of you familiar with business schools, then you might know where Duke University is. That's right up the road from me. If you're not so familiar with the geography of the US, I am located on the East Coast, about halfway between New York and Florida. So North Carolina is on the East Coast, that is. And then I'm like in the middle of the state, kind of on the north end of it, but like kind of central if you were looking at the state of North Carolina. That's where Durham is, right outside of the capital. That's Raleigh. So all right here together. Um, I am excited for this evening. We are continuing on with a series on critical reasoning. So I stepped aside for a little bit to do some quant, and this month we're going to get back into our critical reasoning. We're going to look at one of our major critical reasoning subtypes. Just know that we've covered a bunch of critical reasoning subtypes up to this point. We've covered everything from assumption questions, bold-faced question, right? We've covered the whole gamut of CR questions. We've talked about discrepancies. And so we are going to talk about strengthen and weaken this evening. So without any further ado, the big plan, the agenda, is to do a quick process review. If you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to check down in the comments. There will be links to the previous parts of this workshop that we've been doing already. So lots of this will be part 5, if you will. And then if you'd like a little bit more in depth, you can check out the first part of that series, but we'll talk about it briefly and how it applies to this question type this evening. Then we'll focus in on the strengthen and weaken question types. We are almost done with our critical reasoning family of questions. We will talk about how to deconstruct arguments. We did a lot of that last time in assumptions, and we will talk about common trap or wrong answers. Yeah. So I find that strengthen and weaken questions, one usually comes naturally to people. People tend to be better at strengthen, and then they're not as good at weaken, or they're good at weaken, but not as good at strengthen. I think it's just the way we think about arguments and pick them apart. And are we thinking of the flaws in the argument, or are we thinking about what the argument needs to be strengthened? And that can kind of lead us to a strength in one of these question types over the other. So as you're practicing both tonight and going forward, keep an eye on that, right? Is one area your strength? Is one area your weakness? It may not always be what you expect. So as a little refresher about critical reasoning in general, it is part of the verbal section of the GMAT. The GMAT's got 2 question types in its verbal section, critical reasoning and reading comprehension. These 2 questions, roughly 50-50 of the 23 questions in the full verbal section. There will be some experimental in there, so the numbers are sometimes a little bit off, but 23 questions where we've got about 45 minutes, so just under 2 minutes per question. Critical reasoning, again, somewhere between 10 and 13. Reading comp, same, right? Somewhere between 10 and 13. We may have a few more of one or the other in the specific section that we see. Reading comp are your big passage on the right side of the screen, questions on the left side of the screen. The passage will have generally 2 to 4 questions that come with it. And so you'll be reading this like bigger chunk of text, but you'll have multiple problems that you will then apply to that text. Generally, we're going to spend some time upfront reading, and then our time per question sort of shortens up. So instead of spending close to 2 minutes per problem, we're down closer to about 1.5 minutes, because we're going to front load a lot of the reading. Critical reasoning is one argument at the top followed by a single question below it. And so for these, we really are going to need the 2 minutes. Critical reasoning can be very time intensive. The argument itself is usually short, no more than 3 or 4 sentences in length, usually no more than a few lines long. However, the answer choices can be kind of bulky, and navigating those answer choices can be quite tough. Now, in the world of critical reasoning, there are actually a lot of subtypes. And so that's what we've been sort of marching our way through in these free prep hours. Subtypes such as find the discrepancy, or boldface kind of structural questions. We've looked at inference questions, and we've looked at the assumption questions that kind of like head a whole family of questions that focus on the flaws or missing information in an argument. So these will be questions like find the assumption, strengthen the argument, weaken the argument, or evaluate the argument. And so again, these 4 question types are going to be the same family because they tend to be paired with the same type of argument. It's an argument that's going to make some sort of prediction. It's going to declare that a certain plan will have a certain outcome. It might look at investigating the why, the causes, an explanation of why something happened. And so critical reasoning in this assumption family is going to build arguments where the author has staked a claim. The author has put her support behind a specific conclusion and has claimed this conclusion is true. This plan is going to work. This is why this happened. Our job is to look in at that argument and say, I think there's some information missing here. And so based on the information that's missing, how would I strengthen that argument? How would I weaken that argument? How would I evaluate that argument? What else would I want to know about? Or even getting more essential, what are the assumptions that that author is making? So all of these question types, all 4 of those question types, could be asked of the exact same passage. And in fact, the first 2 example questions we'll do, one strengthen and one weaken, will both be on the exact same passage, right? And so I want you to start to see how these like argument type of problems breed holes and flaws that we can then exploit to either strengthen, in tonight's case, or weaken. Now, when doing this, we're going to apply a 4-step process regardless of the subtype of problem. Our big umbrella process is going to always be the same. So these 4 kind of big steps are meant to kind of be a guidepost so that you're not skipping valuable check-ins and rushing into answer choices, rushing into a process of elimination without really getting your head wrapped around the argument. So our first step in our 4-step process is to identify the question itself. So I see I'm in critical reasoning, but which subtype am I in? Oh, okay, this is an assumption question. This is a strengthen question. So this first step is I've got to figure out which subtype I'm in because that's going to tell me how to read the argument. If I have an argument that's going to ask me about an assumption, strengthen, weaken, I'm really looking for the conclusion and trying to understand how the author built that conclusion. If, however, I'm in one of the earlier question types that we looked at, inference, I'm in the type of argument that may not have its own conclusion because I'm going to be asked to draw a conclusion. So understanding which question subtype we're in is going to help me be a more effective reader of the argument itself. Like, what job am I meant to do here? So identify the question, or in some cases, I might say identify the question family. So, okay, I'm in an assumption family question. I need to understand the conclusion. I need to understand how the argument was built. I'm looking for the flaws and holes. I'm kind of keeping my eye out for what's missing. Step 2, right, once I've identified the question, I am in fact going to go read. And part of that read is to deconstruct the information given to me on the screen. Now, I read critical reasoning arguments twice. 100% of the time I read them twice. And usually I'll go back in and potentially even read sections of it a third or fourth or however many times I need to reread certain snippets of it. Again, arguments are pretty short. As we deconstruct an argument, though, I would say a minimum of 2 passes. Your first pass is to find the conclusion. So I'm going to read the whole thing, just trying to figure out what is this author selling me. And then my second pass is to better understand the argument, the structure of that argument that the author has built around their conclusion. Okay, so pass 1, what in the world is the conclusion? Pass 2 is to actually start to take in the entire reading or the critical reasoning argument. And so that second pass is where I really start to weave together the narrative, and I'm actively looking for information that the author may have omitted, right? Or kind of logical leaps that the author might be making. Once we've finished deconstructing the argument, I actually want to put everything up to this point together. I want to mentally reframe and rephrase the argument to myself, but I also want to do that in the context of the specific question. And so we call this pause and state the goal. The idea here is that I'm going to stop and I'm going to say, okay, here's what the author is concluding, and here's how they think that that's true. Here's their evidence. If I'm supposed to strengthen, that means that I want to make it more likely that X happens. I want something else, some new piece of information that makes me feel more confident that blank is going to happen. Or if my job is to weaken, I'm going to do the same thing. The argument was about this. If I want to weaken, I want to undermine the connection between this and this, or show that this outcome is not as likely to come true. Right? So we're going to pause, state the goal, and then as we move through the answer choices, we'll work from wrong to right, process of elimination. This is exceedingly important. This pausing and stating the goal before moving into the answer choices is exceedingly important in strengthen or weaken. I find that one of the most common wrong answer traps that people fall into is picking the opposite. They get turned around and they forget that they were meant to be strengthening, and the answer choice seems important because it is important, but it weakens. So I will often in a strengthen weekend stop every couple of answer choices and remind myself of the goal. I'm meant to be doing blank. Anytime I encounter an answer choice that's confusing or convoluted, I'm not going to fight with it. I'm going to leave it on the board, meaning my A, B, C, D, E on my paper. I'm just going to leave it there and move on to the next one. So generally, I will not read an answer choice more than twice without moving on. It does not mean I'm eliminating it. It just means that if I've read it twice and I don't understand, or if I'm not super sure that it either is a good answer or is definitely eliminatable, I'm going to ignore it and go to the next. I have on, multiple occasions chosen an answer that I wasn't entirely sure about, but I knew it wasn't the other four. And so I picked it. Does it make me feel the most confident and happy when that happens? No. But I also really felt confident that the four wrong answers were wrong. And while I wasn't fully understanding what the right answer was trying to explain or convey, I knew the other four were wrong. So I was like, well, we're going to pick it. And it was the right answer. Okay. So we want to give ourselves permission to let an answer choice go, come back to it. I don't have to make an assessment on my first pass through for everything. Okay. When we're looking for strengthen or weaken types of questions, we are generally, these are usually pretty easy to spot, I'll say. The concept of, like which of the following strengthens are pretty obvious strengthen questions. Which of the following weakens or undermines or casts serious doubt? The language of a weaken problem. So language like strengthens and strongly supports are often the language of strengthen. Undermines, casts most doubt, often the language of a weaken problem. And then we've also got kind of some weird ones that turn up. And one of the most famous and can be frustrating is the weaken, accept, or strengthen, accept. So first question to the group. If a question tells you that all of the following weaken, accept, what are you looking for? What are you looking for? Hmm. Yeah, so we would often think, oh, this is just going to be the one that strengthens, right? Clearly, this will be the one that strengthens. Um, in fact, that's not always the case. What's the opposite of weaken? The opposite of weaken is doesn't weaken. So the correct answer might strengthen. It's possible, but it's not a guarantee that it'll strengthen. It may just do nothing. Right? It may not be involved at all. Now, I do want to show you one question that is often mistaken. And so let me get this on the board for you. And we'll look at what it is asking us to do. And it does, in fact, or can, in fact, really feel like this language of support. And so we do want to be a little bit careful when we see support language. So take a look at this that I just added. Notice it has the language support. But is that a strengthen question? What do you think? It says the word support. So we need to look at this. Yeah, this is actually an inference question. So this is the one thing I do want to highlight. Which of the following, if true, right, let's say we've got this, which of the following, if true, best supports the argument question? Or, and there's usually a, like the mayor's argument or something. Or, which of the following is best supported by the argument? Now, before it actually said the word inference, and so it was an inference. Does anybody know what that means, an inference question? If I'm meant to be drawing an inference. What does that mean, an inference question? Okay. Had a couple of guesses privately. It's not quite an assumption. It's not quite right. What does that mean to infer? Ah, okay. So this is when we are thinking about, right? So I'll give you both of these with like a little fake argument above it, right? Like whatever. Here's some fake text in gray. Here's our little fake argument up here. And this is the argument. Okay. The key to both of these questions is the direction of support. Right. In this first example, the direction of support is going to go, and so I'll actually give you another one. I'll give the answer choices down here. Okay. Here's my other one down here. So if this is my argument, and then I have answers. Okay. In the first example, it's saying, which of the following, so which of the following, if true, now often say if true, best supports the mayor's argument. Where is the mayor's argument, do you think? Do you think it's down in the answer choices, or do you think it's up here? So where would the mayor's argument potentially be? Yeah, it's going to be like up in this argument part. So the direction of support goes from answer choices up to the argument, right? So support is going from answer choices up. The second one, though, which direction is the support going? It's like a subtle shift in the language. In the first one, it's which of the following support the argument. In the second one, which of the following is supported by the argument. Now we have support going from the argument down to the answer choices. So now our support, it's like the argument itself is the support leading to a conclusion. And so if the support here is coming from the answer choices and going up into the argument, it means that the conclusion is up in the argument. And so this is a strengthen question. If the support is the argument meant to be leading to an answer choice, right, which of the following is being supported by the argument, that means that the conclusion is in the answer choices. And these are inference, or another way to call these would be draw a conclusion questions. And what we're doing in these two cases are completely the opposite. In a strengthen question, I'm trying to come up with new information that makes the argument that I just read sound better. In an inference or draw a conclusion problem, I'm trying to assess what I read, and I'm trying to state a conclusion that comes directly from that text. No new information. I'm only trying to state what I can prove to be true based on what I just read. A really good signal here is this language of if true. I should absolutely expect in these answer choices new information. Right? There's absolutely going to be new information coming in to help bolster up this argument. Whereas in an inference question, I should expect no new info. Everything here should fall directly from this argument itself. Okay, so just be careful. This language of support, slow down when you see the word support or strengthen, because you need to figure out, am I in a strengthen question? Or am I in an inference, draw a conclusion question? And that is not always a simple thing to tell. So on our previous page with all of our examples, this, which of the following inferences is supported by the passage above, this is a draw a conclusion question. This is not a strengthen question. Okay. All right, so we ready to try one? Let's get a little bit of a poll in. So up to this point, how do we feel? 1, least comfortable, 5, most comfortable. Where are we landing? Okay, I'll take it. I will take it. And note you've got room in the chat window, so feel free to jump in if you haven't yet. All right, so let's think about our 4-step process. Okay, our 4-step process is this idea of, step 1, read the question. So we're going to take our eyes generally to the middle of the screen and try and decide what kind of question we're dealing with. So step 1, identify the question. Which kind of question is this one, y'all? Very nice. Yeah, we got a strengthen question. And then we'll move to step 2. We're going to deconstruct the argument. Be ready to read it twice First pass, we find the conclusion. So let's do that one first. What is the conclusion in this argument? Which sentence? First, second, or third sentence is the conclusion. All right. So first pass is just to find the conclusion. There's some great transition language here. The word clearly, things like thus, therefore, clearly are really nice signals of conclusions. So clearly, the employees were no longer confident in QuestCore's long-term viability. Okay, so this is an explanation, especially for those of you that were with me last time, deconstructing assumptions, right? Deconstructing the arguments with assumptions. Clearly, the employees were no longer confident in QuestCore's long-term viability. They thought QuestCore was in trouble. Okay, so let's see why that's the case. We'll go back, we'll reread the whole argument. And it would appear that QuestCore lost its largest client. And shortly thereafter, many employees started quitting and taking jobs with a competitor. So our author is concluding, well, clearly it's because people think QuestCore is in trouble. Does that argument feel compelling to you? Sometimes it will. The most dangerous arguments are the ones that do feel compelling. Feels like, yeah, that sounds true. But what do y'all think about this one? Does that seem like a reasonable conclusion for our author to draw? That a bunch of employees quit, and so it must be because they're scared that QuestCore is going to go out of business. If you're not thinking that's guaranteed to be the right answer, right, or the right conclusion, type in the chat window. What are your thoughts? Are there other possible explanations here? Okay, I've got a guess. Any other? I have one person that's like, there could be other causes. Like what? What other causes besides lack of confidence? Is there anything else? So I had one person privately say, there's a whole bunch of reasons. Agreed. There are a whole bunch of reasons. Like, sure, maybe losing this largest client, that could be the issue, but there are other things that could be at play. So let's look at some answer choices. Yeah, it's just one client. It's just one client. Okay. I might be asking a question like, what else changed? Okay. What about our first answer choice? What about A? What if I find out that employees at our main competitor recently received a large and well-publicized raise? What do we think? Yay or nay? Would this support our claim? Would this weaken our claim, or would this not matter? Okay. Let's see. I'd love to hear. I've only gotten 2 guesses on this one. I've got one doesn't matter. I've got one guess that it strengthens. Got a few more folks in the room. What do you think? You think it matters and it strengthens, it matters and it weakens, or it doesn't matter? Hmm. So we didn't do our step 3. Right? So step 3 is this pause and state the goal piece. And for me, it is one of what I'll say is the most important pieces of these strengthen and weaken problems. Is that my step 3 is a moment to say, okay, what is my job here? So in this argument, I'm meant to strengthen the claim that concerns about viability cause the employee to quit. So what am I looking for? I am looking for evidence to support, lack of confidence. That's one way to think about it. But I'm also, if I want to blame this on confidence, lack of confidence, I also want to look for evidence that shows it is not some other reason. Like, I want to think, yes, let's blame this on being worried about viability, right? Confidence and long-term viability. Let's blame it on that. If I were to find out that my main competitor recently just told all their employees that they were getting a huge raise and they publicized it, it's like all over the news. Oh yeah, Questcore's biggest competitor is now paying 3 times as much. Maybe I don't want to blame this on viability. I might want to blame this on my employees seeking a higher raise or higher income. And a really great point, like, wait, it has to be something long term, but be careful, it doesn't, right? Like, the long term piece is just they are worried about Questcore's long term viability, so they're leaving. And in this case, it's like, I just need something. If I want something to strengthen, I want something to make that seem more likely. A weekend would make the conclusion seem less likely. It doesn't have to break it. Yeah. Now, for here, if I found out, right, if I was like, oh, clearly these employees just don't think that we are going to be around. And then I find out that my biggest competitor is now like advertising to everyone their giant raises. I might be like, well, hold on. It may have nothing to do with long term viability. They may just want to get paid better. So, in fact, the test writers are absolutely going to say that answer choice A weakens because it gives an alternative explanation. And I want to highlight because a couple of people actually said to me privately in the background that it didn't matter. It had no impact. And so I will hear people say a lot things like out of scope. Oh, like that's out of scope. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Pick your terminology for that. For answer choices that are in fact relevant, that are in scope. So when you get critical reasoning questions right, you still need to check the answer choices and the official explanations and confirm, be really exacting, confirm that you eliminated that answer choice for the right reason. Because if you eliminated that answer choice, but not for the correct logic, then technically you got lucky. And so as questions get harder, one way that the test writer makes them harder is by making the like obviousness of how wrong something is less obvious. And the obviousness of how right the right answer is less obvious. Answer choices start to feel murkier. And if I'm not really specific about my logic behind the right or wrong answer, the murkier the waters, the less I'm going to be able to delineate that's very clearly right. This is very clearly wrong, right? So the number one thing you can do with critical reasoning is review. Whether you get the question right or if you get it wrong, doesn't matter. Review and make sure you're looking at your honest logic for why something was a wrong answer and confirming that your honest logic matches the logic of the official explanation. Okay, so our first one is a weekend because it gives an alternative explanation. How about answer choice B? Okay, so thoughts on this one? Does it feel like it matters? It feels like it doesn't matter. Would it strengthen? Mm. Yeah, and I love, like, Ito, you made this comment earlier, like, well, it was just one client. But what if I find out that that one client is like 60% of our profits and 40% of our sales? This client is huge. It's our largest client by a lot. And so, yeah, this does feel like it matters and that it strengthens, that it supports the importance of this client. I love the way you say that, Isabella. It strengthens by kind of counteracting the, well, it's just one client. Well, what if that one client is basically all of our revenue? That's a lot of our profits. 60% of our profits go into one client that we just lost. So this one feels pretty good, but we do need to evaluate the last answer choice just to check. What do we think about answer choice C? Oh, that's okay. Hmm. So what do we think? I mean, that's not a good sign that prospective hires ultimately choose other companies, but this argument is that about employees who were working there and who left. And so absolutely, I agree with this kind of like, this is where we get to irrelevant because we're not talking about prospective hires and they did go accept jobs with other companies, but they don't directly tie that to, maybe there's reasons for this long-term viability. We care about the current employees and they're leaving because of this viability. Talking about prospective hires, just choosing other companies isn't supporting or weakening that. So this would absolutely fit into our irrelevant. And so generally speaking, in our strength and weaken family of questions, the most common wrong answers are going to be irrelevant or the opposite. So I'm asked to strengthen and some of the answer choices will weaken, or I'm asked to weaken and some of those answer choices will strengthen. Let's jump ahead. I was going to do a second example off of this one, but I think we've sort of seen the way that a weekend would work here. Like if this question were asking for a weekend, then answer choice A would be a great choice for that. Strengthen B, and out of scope, irrelevant for C. So let's try a different problem. Let's try a weekend this time, but with a different argument. And again, we will, let's see, I want to go with this one. Okay, so again, step one, identify the question type. So which of the following would cast the most doubt? This is weird. Cast doubt on the claim that the proposed fee would be unfair. Okay. Let's go deconstruct the argument. Help me understand what is the conclusion of our argument and how is the author supporting that? So our conclusion here follows this language of however the fee would be unfair. And so that's our conclusion, right? The conclusion is the fee is going to be unfair. A conclusion is always going to be a claim. So it'll never be a fact. The plan is to fund this expansion. We're going to propose a fee. Our conclusion, however, is this simple statement, the fee is unfair. And their support for that is this claim that it would impose costs on all travelers only to benefit the few. So everybody's going to pay for this thing that really only helps the fewest people, like this little small number of people. And they're like, well, we've got to expand our runways and infrastructure and air traffic control to accommodate these smaller planes, the larger number of them. And okay, so That seems reasonable to say, like, how is this fair that we're imposing costs on all airline travelers as opposed to charging just the people who are using these new private planes? But as I move to step 3, which is pause and state the goal, I'm supposed to cast doubt on this claim that it's unfair. So what does that mean? I'd like to find a way to show that it does seem fair, right? So I want to kind of mentally prep that I'm looking for an answer to make this seem, maybe a little more fair. Like maybe it is fair. Maybe it is okay that this is the. So here you go. I'm going to go ahead and give you all 5 of your answer choices. And do me a favor, pull in when you think you've got it. So let's start with any answer choices that y'all think would actually strengthen this claim around unfairness. So let's look to eliminate. Are there any answer choices that would make you think, yeah, this is unfair? This doesn't feel fair. Yeah, I think D would feel unfair, right? Like D, this idea that travelers who use small planes are all wealthy and they're traveling on business. Like I would think, why are we making everyone else pay if this small group is actually quite wealthy or they've got businesses that could pay for it? This makes it almost seem more unfair. And the fact that we would have a substantial fee needed to pay for this also feels like it'd be a little unfair. Like we're making, I mean, if it were just like a super small and negligible fee, okay, maybe. But both of these would certainly, you could make the argument for both of these that they would weaken. Now, I love answer choice A. I want to come back to it in just a second. Answer choice A is a phenomenal trap answer in the world of strength and weaken and assumption, in fact. How about B? What if the fee, if imposed, isn't actually going to help? It's not really going to change the overall volume of air travel. Well, I guess I shouldn't say it. It's not going to help. It's not going to change the volume of air travel. It's not going to cause fewer people. No, you're exactly right. I spell on A, but we're coming back. So B is irrelevant because we don't need the fee to have an impact on air travel, right? What's the fee meant to accomplish? The fee is meant to fund the expansion to accommodate the already increasing air traffic I don't actually need it to change or reduce, or right, I don't need it to do any of those things. So we'd actually call B pretty comfortably irrelevant. But A is maybe one of my favorite, and I have a lot of folks saying, oh, A feels like it would weaken. And I think we have to be kind of careful, because if this were a weaken question, A would not be the correct answer. So let's come back to A in a second. Several people told me C is our one strengthen. The idea being that if it reduces delays, that helps out lots of people. The reduction in delay means that lots of us might benefit from this, because I don't have to sit in my big commercial plane now and be sitting around waiting on delays. So maybe I am helped by this. I'm not the only person. Like, those private planes aren't the only ones who get the benefit. It's not going to benefit just a few, it's going to benefit a lot of us. A is what I call a motivation trap. So motivation traps are really common in plan problems. It's a very common wrong answer when the question is asking about the viability or possible usefulness or success of a plan. Notice the argument doesn't say, should we have the plan? Should there be a fee? Should there be a plan? It says a fee is unfair. And that's the only part that we're meant to be assessing. Similarly, if it was like, is the fee going to work? Is the fee going to, whatever. My job is not to decide if we should instigate a fee or not. My point is to answer the very narrow question, is the fee fair or is it unfair? Or in some other cases, is the plan going to work or will it not? I don't care whether having a plan is the right idea. I just care about the specific results they ask for. And y'all are exactly right. Like, A makes the expansion seem unnecessary, but we're not asking whether the expansion is necessary. We're asking if the fee structure is fair. So it turns out I don't care whether the existing national airport infrastructure, is fine, or if I need a different one. Like, I don't care. I don't care about whether we'd be fine with the way it is. What I care about is this fee fair or not? And A doesn't address the point of whether the fee is or is not fair. And so it is irrelevant. Really tricky, in fact. Let's try one more. I'm going to give you a timer and the whole question yourself this time. But I'm going to really strongly encourage you, right? Start with step 1, read the question text. Oops. Then step 2, read the argument and deconstruct. And then step 3, pause and state the goal. Okay, so really take a minute to make sure you understand what the question is asking you to do, deconstruct the argument, and kind of get it all clear in your mind before you move into the answer choices. Yeah. All right. Here comes your timer. I'll cut us off at about the 2.5 minute, 3-minute mark. All right, if you haven't done so, shoot me an answer. What do you think the correct answer to this problem is? All right, so we're a little bit all over the place. Okay, I love it. Step one, read the question, right? So what kind of question am I in? Well, which of the following serves to weaken accept? This means that 4 answers weaken. That's going to be my job. My job is to go find 4 answer choices that weaken the argument and eliminate them. Okay. I'm going to find 4 answers that weaken the argument and eliminate them. So now I've got to go read the argument. They're talking about these new DARPA projects that they're claiming would benefit not just the military, but also private industry. And that in many occasions, all of this money that went into funding military research ended up in like spillover technologies that then helped with corporate growth and development. And this is going to keep coming. So the argument essentially says, yeah, this is really expensive, but it doesn't just help military, it helps private industry. And helps private industry because of research that creates technologies that spill over into private industry, corporate growth. Okay, so argument says this spending good for corporate growth because of research and technologies. And I need 4 answers to weaken. So I'm going to pause. So I've got my step 2. I'm going to now pause and state the goal. And for me, the goal is I need to weaken this thing. I've got to weaken it 4 times. Because remember, the opposite of weaken isn't strengthen. The opposite of weaken is doesn't weaken. So it might strengthen, but it might also just like not matter. So I'm safer in an accept problem to treat it like a weaken, but find 4 weakeners and eliminate them all. So what would it mean to weaken this? I'm looking for something that shows that maybe this money won't help private industry via research and technology. That's the sort of piece I'm looking for here. I want 4 answer choices that say spending this money isn't going to help private industry. Research and technology are not going to help. So I'm going to look at some answer choices that nobody picks. So I'm going to start with answer choice E. If the research initiative is focused on stuff that private corporations don't care anything about, would be ineffective for private corporations, this is not going to help, right? Like this won't help private industry. And so if this isn't going to help private industry, that is exactly the weaken I was looking for. So I'm going to eliminate it. And nobody chose B. In the past decade, DARPA has adopted an increasingly restrictive stance regarding the use of IP from research. Well, that makes me think that it won't spill to private industry, right? Like it won't be made available. And so that would also weaken the argument that this is going to spill over into private industry through research and technology. So now let's look at some of the other choices. We'll just do them in order. If we look at A, if this research is going to take up a bunch of talented scientists, people who would have worked in private corporations but now won't, now are going to be sucked into the military. Is that helping private industry or potentially hurting it? That might hurt private industry directly. So let's hang on to that one for a minute. If we go to C, if this hadn't been approved, a ton of this funding would instead have been directed towards tax breaks to businesses, meaning that all these businesses would have gotten tax breaks if this weren't approved. They would have maybe been better off had it not been approved, which means C might also hurt private industry and these industrial companies, private corporate development and growth. D says DARPA is always doing expensive stuff. I'm not really sure. Okay, they're doing a lot of expensive stuff. Okay, but if that expensive stuff is helpful to private industry, that would strengthen. If all that expensive stuff doesn't help private industry, that would weaken. But I don't have any idea about whether this costly research helps or hurts. I have no idea what the impact of this knowledge is. I'm not sure at all what this knowledge. And so this is a really good example of something that doesn't weaken because it has no impact. Answer choices A and C are in fact both weakens, so we eliminate them. And the only answer choice that doesn't weaken kind of does nothing. And so the key to accept problems, they're not super common, but the key to accept problems is not to think about the accept part, because the opposite of weaken doesn't mean strengthen. The opposite of strengthen doesn't mean weaken. What I want to do is instead say, oh, okay, all of these weaken. 4 of the 5 are going to weaken. So let me go find the 4 that weaken and mark them out. And so our correct answer is D. Tough one. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for hanging out and your patience, sticking around a little bit late. I wanted to remind you, for those of you here, you know the links to get to our free events, both our free classes, as well as our free prep hours and our free foundations of math. We've got all kinds of free workshops. If you're catching us on YouTube, follow the link on the screen. You can do that to come and check out Be Live for one of these free prep hours. Shoot us a message. Let us know the kinds of things that you'd like for us to cover in these free prep hours. But it has been an absolute pleasure. Amazing to get to hang out with y'all this fine afternoon or evening, or whatever wee hours of the day you happen to be studying. Thanks so much for coming to hang out with us, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your spring and summer, and good luck studying. Bye, y'all.